The air tasted like ash. Christmas lights, once cheerful, now blurred into mocking streaks of color against the suburban darkness. The ceramic mug lay in pieces at my feet, the spilled eggnog a sticky testament to a holiday gone horribly wrong. They were all inside, behind the frosted window, the sound of their laughter muffled but unmistakable, each peal a tiny, sharp shard twisting in my gut. It wasn't just disappointment I felt. It was the cold, hard certainty that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. If you have ever felt betrayed by your own flesh and blood, subscribe now and join our community of survivors who turned pain into power. Christmas dinner was always a carefully orchestrated performance of forced cheer and thinly veiled resentment. My mother, bless her heart, had a knack for making me feel like a disappointment, a sentiment she usually reserved for special occasions. My brother Ethan was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, despite his long history of questionable decisions and even more questionable financial habits. This year, however, felt different. The barbs seemed sharper, the judgment more pointed, all aimed squarely at my pathetic freelance job, as my mother so eloquently put it. I'd spent years building my tech career, quietly amassing a portfolio of successful projects and smart investments, while they dismissed me as the daughter who dabbled in computers. Audrey, they saw me as a failure to launch, someone who couldn't hold down a real job. The truth was, I was making more in a month than Ethan probably saw in a year, but I kept it to myself, preferring to avoid the inevitable drama that would ensue if they knew. I should have known my quiet life couldn't last forever. The storm was brewing, and all it needed was a spark. The spark came in the form of Ethan's insatiable curiosity and my own foolish complacency. After dinner, while everyone else was gathered in the living room, feigning interest in my aunt's slideshow of her trip to Branson, I retreated to the relative peace of the dining room to catch up on some emails. My laptop was open, displaying my investment portfolio, a testament to years of hard work and careful planning. Ethan, never one to respect boundaries, sauntered in, ostensibly to borrow my charger. He hovered behind me, his gaze drifting towards the screen. I should have closed it, should have seen the avarice glinting in his eyes, but I was tired, and the constant need to protect myself from their judgment was exhausting. He saw it, the $14 million staring back at him from the monitor. The blood drained from his face, replaced by an expression that was a mixture of disbelief and outright greed. He didn't say a word, just stared, his silence more deafening than any insult my mother could have hurled. He backed away slowly, a predator sizing up its prey, and I knew, in that instant, that everything was about to change. The person I trusted most was one of them. The days that followed were a masterclass in subtle psychological warfare. Ethan, emboldened by his newfound knowledge, began to subtly undermine me, planting seeds of doubt in my parents' minds about my financial stability, hinting at reckless spending and risky investments. My mother, ever eager to confirm her preconceived notions, lapped it up like cheap wine. Suddenly, every purchase I made was scrutinized, every decision questioned. The new car I'd bought with cash was deemed an extravagant waste, my contributions to family expenses were dismissed as paltry, and my work, once a source of mild amusement, was now openly mocked as a hobby that would never amount to anything. It was a slow, insidious erosion of my self-worth, each jab carefully calibrated to inflict maximum damage. I tried to defend myself, to explain the reality of my situation, but my words fell on deaf ears. Ethan had poisoned the well, and now everything I said was filtered through a lens of suspicion and distrust. My father, usually a voice of reason, remained silent, caught between his loyalty to his wife and his vague sense of unease. His silence was a betrayal in itself, a tacit endorsement of the abuse I was enduring. Sleepless nights became the norm, the weight of their injustice pressing down on me like a physical burden. I replayed the scene in the dining room over and over in my head, searching for a way to rewind time, to erase the moment when Ethan's eyes landed on my laptop screen. But it was too late. The genie was out of the bottle, and the only question was how much damage it would inflict. I considered confronting Ethan directly, but I knew it would be futile. He would deny everything, twist my words, and paint me as the paranoid, unstable daughter who was imagining things. Besides, a direct confrontation would only alert them to the fact that I knew what they were up to, and I wasn't ready to reveal my hand just yet. The silence was my armor. So, I did what I always did. I retreated into myself, building a wall around my emotions, trying to protect myself from the constant barrage of negativity. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of coding, the logical precision of algorithms. I doubled down on my investments, meticulously tracking every transaction, ensuring that my financial house was in perfect order. It was a way of regaining control, of proving to myself that I wasn't the failure they wanted me to be. But even as I worked, a seed of resentment began to sprout within me, a dark, bitter thing that threatened to consume me from the inside out. I started to fantasize about revenge, about finding a way to expose their hypocrisy, to make them pay for the pain they were inflicting. The fantasies were fleeting at first, just brief flashes of anger and resentment, but they grew stronger with each passing day, fueled by the constant stream of negativity. I knew that I couldn't let them win, that I couldn't allow them to destroy everything I had worked so hard to achieve. But I also knew that I couldn't fight them head on. We're too entrenched, too skilled at manipulating the narrative. I needed a different approach, a way to strike back without revealing my intentions. I smiled, I acted broken. But I was recording everything. The breaking point came a few weeks later, during another excruciatingly awkward family dinner. The conversation, as usual, revolved around Ethan's latest business venture, a harebrained scheme involving cryptocurrency and a revolutionary new app that was guaranteed to make everyone rich. My parents were eating it up, their eyes shining with the reflected glory of their golden child. I tried to steer the conversation towards something, anything else, but my efforts were met with thinly veiled hostility. Finally, my mother turned to me, a saccharine smile plastered on her face. "So, Audrey," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "how's the, freelancing going? Still making enough to cover your rent?" Question was a deliberate provocation, a calculated attempt to humiliate me in front of the entire family. I felt my face flush with anger, but I forced myself to remain calm. "It's going well, actually," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I've recently landed a few major contracts that will keep me busy for the next several months." My mother's smile faltered for a moment, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. She clearly hadn't expected me to push back. Ethan jumped in, eager to seize the opportunity to score points. "Major contracts?" he scoffed. "Sure, Audrey, and I'm about to become the next Jeff Bezos." The laughter rippled around the table, each peel a tiny knife twisting in my gut. I looked at my father, hopping for some sign of support, but he just stared down at his plate, his face a mask of indifference. That was it. Something inside me snapped. The years of accumulated resentment, the constant judgment, the blatant favoritism, it all came crashing down on me at once. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the floor, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. "You know what?" I said, my voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "I'm done. I'm done with the insults, the condescension, the constant need to prove myself to you people. I'm done." I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving them sitting there, stunned into silence. I didn't stop until I reached my car, the cold night air a welcome contrast to the stifling atmosphere inside the house. I sat there for a long time, the engine idling, tears streaming down my face. I felt like I had reached rock bottom, like I had nothing left to lose. And in that moment of despair, a new idea began to form in my mind, a plan so audacious, so daring, that it took my breath away. It was a plan for revenge, a way to expose their lies and reclaim my life. It would be risky, it would be difficult, but it was the only way to restore balance. I wiped away my tears, took a deep breath, and put the car in gear. The road ahead was dark, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I knew their biggest weakness, the fact they thought they were untouchable. The following weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and frantic activity. I moved out of the family home, finding a small, anonymous apartment in a different part of town. It was a far cry from the comfortable, familiar surroundings I had known, but it was a necessary step, a way to physically and emotionally distance myself from the toxicity that had consumed my life. The silence in the new apartment was deafening at first, a stark contrast to the constant noise and drama of my family. But gradually, I began to find a strange sense of peace in the solitude, a chance to finally hear my own thoughts, to reconnect with the person I had been before they had tried to break me. I spent hours poring over documents, meticulously reviewing every financial transaction, every email, every text message, searching for the evidence I needed to expose their scheme. It was like piecing together a shattered vase, each fragment a tiny clue that would eventually reveal the whole picture. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered, a tangled web of lies, deceit, and financial impropriety that implicated not only Ethan, but also my mother and several of their close associates. The cryptocurrency venture was a sham, a Ponzi scheme designed to enrich Ethan and his cronies at the expense of unsuspecting investors. My mother was secretly funneling money into offshore accounts, evading taxes and hiding assets. And my father, I discovered with a sinking heart, was aware of it all, turning a blind eye to the illegal activity in exchange for a share of the profits. The realization that my own father was complicit in their deception was a crushing blow. He had always been the one I could count on, the voice of reason, the moral compass of the family. To discover that he was just as corrupt as the rest of them was almost more than I could bear. It felt like the final thread holding me to my past had been severed, leaving me adrift in a sea of betrayal. I considered abandoning my plan, walking away from it all, and starting a new life somewhere far away. But the thought of them getting away with it, of them continuing to live their lives of luxury and privilege while their victims suffered, was unbearable. The resentment that had been simmering beneath the surface now boiled over into a white-hot rage, a burning desire for justice that consumed me entirely. I knew I couldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them destroy everything I had worked so hard to achieve. I would fight back, not with anger or violence, but with cold, calculated precision. Their biggest weakness was their arrogance, their belief that they were untouchable. They thought they could get away with anything because they had always been able to manipulate and control the people around them. They underestimated me, assuming that I was too weak, too naive to see through their charade. But they were wrong. I was stronger than they knew, and I was determined to make them pay for their sins. The weight of their injustice pressed down on me, almost suffocating, but I refused to break. I would use their own weapons against them, turning their lies and deceit into instruments of their destruction. I felt a chilling calm wash over me, a sense of clarity and purpose that I hadn't felt in years. The fear and doubt that had plagued me for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a steely resolve. I began to meticulously document everything, gathering evidence, building a case that would be airtight, irrefutable. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who specialized in white-collar crime, and laid out my plan. She listened intently, her eyes narrowed, her expression unreadable. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "This is a risky move, Audrey," she said, her voice grave. "If you fail, you could face serious legal repercussions. Are you sure you're ready for this?" I looked her in the eye, my gaze unwavering. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "They took everything from me, now it's my turn to take it back." The lawyer nodded slowly, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "All right," she said. "Let's get to work." Together, we crafted a strategy that was both audacious and meticulously planned, a carefully orchestrated series of moves that would expose their crimes and bring them to justice. It would be a long and arduous process, but I was prepared to do whatever it took. I spent hours working with the lawyer, going over every detail, anticipating every possible obstacle. I also began to discreetly contact the victims of Ethan's Ponzi scheme, offering them my support and providing them with the information they needed to file lawsuits and recover their losses. It was a slow, painstaking process, but with each person I helped, I felt a sense of purpose, a sense that I was finally making a difference. The darkness had been all-consuming, but a single spark of resolve began to ignite within me. They thought they had broken me, but they had only made me stronger. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. The plan started with securing irrefutable evidence. I needed more than just my word against theirs. I needed documentation, recordings, and proof that couldn't be dismissed as the rantings of a disgruntled daughter. I started by focusing on Ethan's cryptocurrency scheme. I knew he was using a network of shell corporations to launder money and hide his tracks, but I needed to pinpoint the exact accounts and transactions. I hired a private investigator, a former forensic accountant with a knack for uncovering hidden assets. He was expensive, but worth every penny. He helped me trace the flow of money from the investors to Ethan's accounts, revealing a clear pattern of fraud and deception. We uncovered emails and text messages that implicated Ethan in the scheme, providing concrete evidence of his intent to defraud. I also started gathering information about my mother's offshore accounts. I knew she was using a Panamanian law firm to shield her assets from the IRS, but I needed to find the specific account numbers and balances. I used my coding skills to hack into her email account, carefully navigating the digital landscape to avoid detection. It was a risky move, but the potential reward was too great to ignore. I found a treasure trove of information, including scanned copies of bank statements, correspondence with a law firm, and records of wire transfers. The evidence was damning, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was engaged in tax evasion and money laundering. I knew that exposing my parents would be a painful and messy process, but I couldn't stand by and watch them continue to harm innocent people. Their arrogance had blinded them to the consequences of their actions, and it was time for them to face the music. As I gathered more and more evidence, I realized that I needed to protect myself. My parents were powerful and ruthless, and they wouldn't hesitate to use their resources to silence me if they felt threatened. I consulted with my lawyer about the best way to safeguard my information and ensure my safety. She advised me to create a digital dead man's switch, a system that would automatically release the evidence to the authorities and the media if anything happened to me. I created an encrypted file containing all of the documents, recordings, and emails I had collected. I then set up a timer that would automatically send the file to my lawyer and a select group of journalists if I didn't reset it every day. It was a drastic measure, but it gave me peace of mind knowing that the truth would come out even if I was silenced. I also installed security cameras in my apartment, both inside and outside, to monitor any suspicious activity. I changed my phone number and email address, and I avoided any contact with my family or their associates. I knew they were watching me, trying to figure out what I was up to, but I was determined to stay one step ahead of them. I became a ghost, living in the shadows, meticulously planning my next move. The anticipation was building, a sense of excitement mixed with fear. I knew that the moment I exposed the truth, my life would change forever, but I was ready. I had come too far to turn back now. There were close calls. One evening, I noticed a strange car parked outside my apartment building. It was a black SUV with tinted windows, the kind that screamed surveillance. I watched from my window as a man in a dark suit got out of the car and started packing back and forth. He was talking on his phone, his voice low and urgent. I immediately suspected that he was working for my parents, trying to intimidate me or gather information about my activities. I called my lawyer, and she advised me to stay inside and avoid any contact with him. She also contacted the police, who arrived a few minutes later and questioned the man. He claimed he was just waiting for a friend, but the police took down his information and told him to move along. I didn't believe him for a second. I knew my parents were closing in and I needed to act fast. I accelerated my timeline, pushing forward the date of my public reveal. I couldn't afford to wait any longer. The risk was too great. Their biggest weakness was their arrogance, the fact that they thought they could control everything and everyone around them. They underestimated me, assuming that I was too scared, too weak to fight back. But they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. The key to their downfall wasn't just the evidence I had meticulously gathered. It was their insatiable greed and unwavering belief in their own superiority. I knew I had to exploit this weakness, to lure them into a trap so perfectly designed that they wouldn't see it until it was too late. The offshore accounts were the linchpin. My mother's vanity was another. She loved the image of being a successful businesswoman, a philanthropist, a pillar of the community. But underneath that carefully constructed facade was a ruthless woman who would stop at nothing to protect her wealth and status. I decided to use her own ambition against her. I crafted an anonymous email, posing as a representative from a prestigious international investment firm. I praised her business acumen, highlighting her impressive portfolio and her keen eye for opportunity. I dangled the prospect of an exclusive investment opportunity, a chance to multiply her wealth exponentially through a series of high-yield, low-risk ventures. The catch? It required a significant upfront investment, a sum large enough to tempt her but not so large as to raise suspicion. I knew she wouldn't be able to resist. Her greed would override her caution, blinding her to the obvious red flags. I set up a secure, encrypted communication channel using a disposable email address and a virtual phone number. I fed her just enough information to pique her interest, keeping her on the hook with tantalizing hints of untold riches. Ethan was a different story. His weakness was his arrogance, his unwavering belief in his own intelligence and charm. He saw himself as a financial genius, a visionary who was destined for greatness. I knew I had to puncture that ego, to expose him as the fraud he truly was. I decided to target his cryptocurrency scheme, the Ponzi scheme that had ruined so many lives. I created a fake online forum, posing as a disgruntled investor who had lost everything in Ethan's venture. I started posting inflammatory messages, accusing him of fraud and demanding answers. I used my coding skills to amplify my message, making it appear as if there was a groundswell of outrage against him. I knew it was only a matter of time before Ethan noticed the online activity. He wouldn't be able to resist the urge to defend himself, to try and control the narrative. I baited the trap, carefully crafting my messages to provoke him, to push him to the point of making a mistake. I knew his temper was his biggest weakness, his tendency to lash out when challenged. I just needed to give him the right opportunity to expose himself. It was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, a battle of wits and wills. I knew that one wrong move could ruin everything. But I was prepared to take the risk. I had come too far to back down now. The plan was intricate, a carefully woven web of deception designed to ensnare them both. I arranged a series of meetings, using intermediaries and coded language to conceal my identity. I wanted to create the illusion of separate opportunities, independent of each other, so they wouldn't suspect that they were being played. I met with my mother at a secluded restaurant, posing as a financial consultant representing the investment firm. I presented her with a detailed proposal, outlining the potential returns and the projected timeline. I used sophisticated jargon and impressive graphics to create an air of legitimacy. She was eating it up, her eyes gleaming with excitement. I could see the dollar signs flashing in her pupils. I knew I had her right where I wanted her. Meanwhile, I communicated with Ethan through the online forum, continuing to provoke him and challenge his claims. He took the bait, responding to my messages with increasingly aggressive and defensive statements. He even threatened to sue me for defamation, a move that only confirmed his guilt. I recorded all of our online exchanges, capturing his every word and every lie. I felt a surge of adrenaline as the plan began to unfold, a mix of excitement and trepidation. I knew I was walking a dangerous line, but I couldn't turn back now. I had to see it through to the end. The final piece of the puzzle was the media. I contacted an investigative journalist, a fearless reporter known for exposing corruption and holding the powerful accountable. I provided her with all of the evidence I had gathered, the documents, the recordings, the emails. She was skeptical at first, but after reviewing the material, she realized the gravity of the situation. She agreed to run the story, to expose my parents' crimes to the world. We coordinated our efforts, planning the release of the information to coincide with the meetings I had arranged. The goal was to create maximum impact, to catch them off guard, and prevent them from covering their tracks. The tension was almost unbearable as the day of reckoning approached. I knew that everything was about to change, that my life would never be the same again. But I was ready. I had spent months preparing for this moment, and I was determined to see justice served. I could feel their doom approaching, a dark cloud gathering on the horizon. They were so close to taking everything from me. I just smiled. The day arrived like a storm, brewing with anticipation and dread. I watched from a distance as my mother arrived at the restaurant, dressed to the nines, radiating an aura of wealth and power. She settled into her seat, her eyes scanning the room, searching for the representative from the investment firm. Moments later, I saw Ethan log into the online forum, ready to defend his reputation against the false accusations of the disgruntled investors. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest, and gave the signal. Investigative journalist published her story, a scathing exposé of my parents' crimes, detailing their fraudulent schemes and their lavish lifestyles built on the backs of innocent people. The story went viral within minutes, spreading like wildfire across the internet. Social media exploded with outrage and condemnation. News outlets picked up the story, amplifying the message to a global audience. Simultaneously, the investment firm I had fabricated revealed itself to my mother as a fraud. The contracts she had signed were worthless, the opportunity a mirage. The shock hit her like a physical blow. Her face crumbled, her carefully constructed facade shattered into a million pieces. I could see the realization dawning on her, the understanding that she had been played, outsmarted, and exposed. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. As for Ethan, the online forum became a battleground, a digital arena where his lies were dissected and his reputation destroyed. The evidence I had gathered was irrefutable, the accusations undeniable. Investors began filing lawsuits, demanding their money back. Regulators launched investigations, threatening him with prosecution and imprisonment. His world imploded, his dreams of grandeur reduced to ashes. The fallout was swift and brutal. My parents' empire crumbled, their wealth vanished, their reputations ruined. They were ostracized by their friends, shunned by their community, and abandoned by their allies. Their names became synonymous with greed, corruption, and deceit. They lost everything: their money, their status, their power. More importantly, they lost their freedom. Ethan faced multiple charges of fraud and securities violations. He tried to run to escape the consequences of his actions, but he was apprehended at the airport, attempting to flee the country with a suitcase full of cash. My mother was also charged with tax evasion and money laundering. She tried to deny the allegations, but the evidence was overwhelming. The offshore accounts, the wire transfers, the hidden assets, all painted a clear picture of her guilt. They were both convicted and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Their reign of terror was finally over. Watching them face justice, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was a sense of satisfaction, knowing that they were finally being held accountable for their actions. But there was also a sense of sadness, a recognition of the tragic waste of their lives. They had chosen greed and power over integrity and compassion, and they had paid the ultimate price. In the aftermath, I found myself grappling with the weight of what I had done. I had exposed my own parents, brought them down, and destroyed their lives. It was a painful and messy process, but it was necessary. They had caused so much harm to so many people, and they needed to be stopped. I used the money I recovered to help the victims of Ethan's Ponzi scheme, providing them with the resources they needed to rebuild their lives. I also became an advocate for financial literacy, working to educate people about the dangers of fraud and the importance of responsible investing. I emerged from the shadows, no longer a ghost, but a survivor. I had faced my demons, confronted my fears, and emerged stronger on the other side. The darkness had lifted, replaced by a sense of hope and purpose. I had learned a valuable lesson about the true meaning of justice and the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. I rebuilt my life piece by piece, focusing on my career, my friends, and my own well-being. I found peace in helping others, in making a positive impact on the world. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.